אוקיי. Okay, we are live. Let's record. אוקיי, היי לכולם. ברוכים הבאים. I'll start with a little bit of Hebrew, Victoria, just to say, actually, I think everyone should understand what I'm saying by now. If not, you're in the wrong place, actually.
I've been living for 5 years almost in the UK. So
Okay. Hi, David. Nice to meet you. I'm going to mute everyone now. I'm just going to leave myself on. I just want to say hi to Victoria and thank you for joining us. I will share everything I know about you later on. Just want to say hi to everyone who's here and thank you for taking the time to participate. Also hi to everyone on Facebook. I hope some guys are viewing and thank you all for coming. And we will start this very special. I personally looked forward for this webinar for quite some time. Even though I've been here for 18 years, I definitely don't speak British. My English is not bad, but my British is far from being what I wanted it to be. And therefore I'll start with my part of explaining a little bit of what I do, who I am. And then I will introduce you to Victoria. She's the main event. I'm just the warm-up for this evening. And that's it. I hope you enjoy. So I'm going to do this part in Hebrew. So Victoria, now I'm doing it in Hebrew. I need my forte for this. אז היי לכולם, שמי דנה אבן חן, יש לי את העסק איזי לנדון, שזה עסק של ייעוץ לרילוקיישן ותמיכה באנשים שעושים לפה רילוקיישן. אז מי אנחנו? אנחנו בעצם עסק משפחתי, אני ובעלי הקמנו אותו, אנחנו הורים ל3 ילדים, אנחנו גרים בלונדון, ובעצם הסיפור שלנו התחיל, או בעצם שלי כיוזמת העסק, התחיל לפני כמעט 18 שנה שעברתי לעבוד פה באל על, גם בעלי עבד פה באל על, ככה הכרנו, ובמהלך העבודה שלי, אחד הדברים במהלך העבודה שלי הייתי מנהלת כוח אדם. אחד הדברים ששמנו לב בעבודה שלנו באל על זה שאנחנו לא מצליחים להחזיק כוח אדם לאורך זמן, התחלופה מאוד מאוד גבוהה של האנשים, ובעצם לא יכולנו ליהנות מכוח אדם ותיק, יציב, שמחזיק את התחנה. אז אחרי שאלונים ושיחות חתך ניסינו קצת להבין איפה נקודות הכשל, למה אנחנו לא מצליחים להחזיק אנשים בפאקינג לונדון. אז סליחה על השפה. אז מסתבר שפשוט זה היה overwhelming. החוויה של המעבר, הרילוקיישן עצמו היה overwhelming, ואנחנו לא סיפקנו מספיק תמיכה לאנשים במעבר. אם זה בהכנה לקראת המעבר, ואם זה בשבועות הראשונים לתמיכה שלהם, לנחיתה שלהם, לא סיפקנו מספיק תמיכה. והנחיתה באנגליה, במדינה זרה, עם כל המשמעויות של זה, והתחלת עבודה חדשה, וכל ההתאקלמות הבירוקרטית הייתה פשוט too much לאנשים שהם הרגישו שהם שוקים, והם לא מצליחים בעצם ליהנות מהעיר, הם עסוקים כל הזמן בתחושה כזה של, אוקיי, את זה לא הספקתי, ואת זה לא עשיתי, ואני לא מבין מה רוצים ממני פה. אז זהו, אז בעצם פיתחנו, אני הייתי לשמחתי חלק יוזם בתהליך, של בעצם לפתח תוכנית שנותנת תמיכה ארוכה יותר ומורחבת יותר, ושבעצם מחלקת את הדברים לשלבים, כדי באמת לעטוף את העובדים שלנו עד כמה שניתן, ולאפשר להם את הנחיתה כמה שיותר רכה. וזה בעצם מה שאני עושה היום בעסק שלנו. אני בעצם רוצה לעזור לכם לקבל את הנחיתה הכי טובה שאתם יכולים לקבל. המטרות שלנו בעיקר הם בעצם לעשות לכם לגשר על פערי הידע שיש לכם לגבי המעבר לפה, על כל הפרטים שאתם בעצם לא יודעים. המצגת שלי נתקעה, אז רגע, המתינו. רגע. לא, זה לא זה, לא, זה לא זה, אוקיי, זה זה. אז ככה, אז מי בעצם הלקוחות שמגיעים אלינו? מגיעים אלינו לקוחות מכל מיני סוגים ומינים, וכולם מקסימים ומהממים. אז יש לנו אנשים שמגיעים על ויזות סטודנט שצריכים עזרה, יש לנו אנשים שעוברים פה על ויזות עבודה, על רילוקיישנים מהעבודה, חלקם אפילו אנשים שעוברים לפה עם חבילות רילוקיישן מהעבודה שלהם, וגם הם עדיין בסופו של דבר מוצאים את דרכם אליי, כי אני נותנת יחס אישי, חברות הרילוקיישן הגדולות הם לוויתנים, אני לא יכולה, לא מנסה אפילו להתחרות בהם, אבל זה אווירה של קורפורט, מעבירים אותך מבן אדם לבן אדם, אין שפחות ליווי אישי ופחות כאילו תפירת הרילוקיישן לצרכים שלך. אנשים שבאים אליי, אני heavily involved בכל מה שקורה איתם וכל העניינים המשפחתיים שלהם ומה הם זקוקים, האם הם צריכים גם פסיכולוג בנחיתה, והאם הם צריכים בית ספר לצרכים מיוחדים, וכל הדברים האלה אני באמת עוזרת להם מכל הבחינות, אז לכן כאילו גם הרבה מאוד אנשים שמקבלים חבילת רילוקיישן, איכשהו מוצאים את דרכם אליי. אנשים נוספים שעוברים לפה זה משהו כמו 30%, אנשים שעושים הגירה עצמאית, בין אם זה האזרחות האירופאית, מה שהיה אפשר, או בין אם זה עד לא מזמן תכלס, ובין אם זה אזרחויות בריטיות למיניהן, עושים פשוט הגירה עצמאית. יש לנו פה פלושיפס גם, אנשים שעוברים לפה בעקבות תת התמחויות, רופאים, כל מיני אנשים כאלה ואחרים, וגם יזמים, אנשים שבאים פה על טלנט ויזה לממלכה. נו, שוב מתקעה המצגת. אוי, נו. רגע. אני מתנצלת. My presentation is stuck. So one sec. No, it's stuck. Okay, now it's not. Okay. אז מאיפה כולם בעצם מתחילים? אנשים באים לפה, הם רוצים לדעת את כל המידע הזה, זה בדרך כלל ה-frequently asked questions, איפה מוצאים מידע, איפה נגור, איפה מסגרות חינוך, איך ילדים יסתדרו, כל השאלות האלה נמצאות בעצם בראש של מי שמתחיל לתפור את המעבר, וכולם אני מניחה, רובכם לפחות כמו שהגעתם אליי לוובינר, הגעתם דרך קבוצות פייסבוק. עכשיו, יש הרבה מאוד דברים נפלאים בקבוצות הפייסבוק, המון חוכמת המונים מצוינת, אבל גם יש המון מידע לא אמין. יש גם מידע לא אמין, גם אנשים שאתה יודע, אי אפשר לשאול בן אדם איפה אתה רוצה לגור. כל אחד יגיד לך בוא תגור אצלי, כי אצלי הכי טוב. זה לא קשור בכלל אליכם ולתא המשפחתי שלכם, ולאיפה אתם הולכים לעבוד, מה התקציב שלכם, איפה הילדים הולכים ללמוד, איזה בית ספר אתם רוצים. יש כל כך הרבה דברים שצריך לקחת בחשבון לפני שעוברים למקום, למדינה חדשה, שחוכמת ההמונים יכולה לעזור איפשהו, אבל היא גם יכולה מאוד 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 לבלבל, והיא יכולה גם במקרים רבים מאוד גם להטעות אתכם. ואתם לא תגלו את זה עד שחטפתם את הכף על הפרצוף. נו, מה יהיה עם המצגת? היא שוב תקועה לי. אני מתנצלת, אני לא יודעת מה קורה למצגת. אני מנסה שוב. אולי נעבוד ככה? אוקיי, אז איך השירות שלי בעצם נראה? אני מתחילה בשיחת ייעוץ. השיחה שלי תפורה אישית עבורכם. אני מקבלת קודם כל לשלוח לכם שאלון מקדים, כדי להבין בעצם את הספציפיקציות שלכם, מה אתם בעצם מחפשים. ואני עושה ריסרצ' לקראת השיחה, ואני באה אליכם כבר מוכנה עם מקומות מגורים אפשריים ומסגרות חינוך אופציונליות, ונותנת לכם בעצם מידע מאוד מאוד מקיף על שירותי הבריאות, על תחבורה ציבורית, על ספקי שירות, על עבודה עם בנקים, על העברות כספים, כל המידע הזה נמצא, והדברים שמדויקים לכם ולצרכים שלכם. השיחה הזאת היא אורכת כ-90 דקות, היא נעשית בווידאו, אני לא עומדת עם סטופר, יעידו אנשים שנמצאים פה, שאני גם לפעמים עושה שיחות של 2.5, ולפעמים עוד שיחה נוספת אם צריך, חשוב לי שהמידע הזה יגיע אליכם. מבחינתי זה ה-bread and butter של תהליך החיפוש לרילוקיישן. אם יש לכם איזשהו ספק מה לקחת או מה לא לקחת, מבחינת השירותים שאני מציעה, זה המתנה הכי טובה שאני יכולה לתת לכם, זה לדעת לקבל מידע אמין, מדויק, מקצועי, וממנו אתם יכולים להמשיך הלאה. אני חושבת, מעולם לא בדקתי את הסטטיסטיקה, אבל משהו כמו 50% מהאנשים באים אליי לשיחת ייעוץ באמת, וממשיכים לבד את התהליך, כי זה מספיק מפקס אותם להמשך, 50% ממשיכים איתי לשלב הבא, שעכשיו אני אדבר איתכם. המחירונים פה דרך אגב מופיעים כמרץ 21, אבל הם רלוונטיים כבר מעכשיו, כי פשוט לא שמתי לב שהתחלף התאריך. אז ככה, אז השלב הבא בשירות שאני מציעה, זה סיוע במציאת בית. אני נותנת תמיכה לאורך כל השלבים עד קבלת המפתחות, מי שמכם שנמצא לקראת תחילת המעבר, אני נותנת לכם קצת קונטקסט מבחינת התכנון קדימה, תהליך מציאת בית אורך כ3 שבועות, מהרגע שמצאתם את הבית, הכוונה, עד הרגע שקיבלתם את המפתחות, התהליך הזה לוקח כ3 שבועות, אני מלווה אתכם, זה עם 7 שלבים שאני מסבירה עליהם גם בשיחת ייעוץ, ואני מסבירה לכם איך עוברים אותם, ומה, בוא נקרא, נקודות הכשל שיכולות לקרות בדרך ואיך פותרים אותם, ונותנת לכם תמיכה בכל התהליך הזה. השירות מתאים גם למי שמגיע לפה, ובעצם רוצה לעשות ביקור הכנה, עכשיו זה פחות אפשרי בגלל הקורונה, אבל בטח ובטח זה אפשרי עכשיו, בגלל הקורונה, ואנשים שלא רוצים לבוא לביקור הכנה, כי אין להם אפשרות, והמטרה היא להכניס אתכם לבית שלכם, ישר, אתם נוחתים בשדה תעופה ואתם נכנסים לבית שלכם, בלי לעבור במגורים זמניים. היתרון של זה א', בעיקר חיסכון של כסף, אני סתם נכנסת אחת לכמה זמן לפני וובינרים, אני בודקת מה המצב של השוק, נכנסת למקומות כמו Airbnb, ולוקחת תקופה שהיא מתה יחסית, כדי לראות מה העלויות של הדברים. אז אם אתם תסתכלו, בתקופה של אפריל, זוג לחודש שעולה לו הכי זול שמצאתי ב-630 פאונד, אין לי מושג אפילו איפה זה ממוקם בלונדון, פשוט הלכתי על הדבר הכי זול שראיתי, ולמשפחה של 4 נפשות, אני לא מדברת על כאלה שגם עוברים בעלי חיים וכאלה, מדובר על 1,400, 1,500 כמעט פאונד לשהות של חודש, כי זה בערך הזמן שיקח לכם עד שתעברו לבית. השירות שלי בממוצע ברף הנמוך שלו מגיע ל-450, ברף הגבוה שלו ל-590, אני מדברת על חיסכון די משמעותי בכסף. בפועל איך נראה השירות הזה? אנשים פשוט שולחים לי לינקים לבתים שמעניינים אותם, אחרי שכבר עשינו את השיחה ואנחנו מבינים מה הם מחפשים, ואני הולכת לראות את הבתים עבורם, אני מארגנת יום סיורים מסודר, אני הולכת לראות את הבתים עבורם, אני הרגליים והעיניים שלהם, אני עושה איתם שיחת וידאו, הם רואים איתי את הבית ביחד, ואנחנו מתחילים את התהליך הבירוקרטי בהנחה שהם מרוצים מהבית, עד קבלת המפתחות. הבתים בלונדון טסים מהשוק, בית שעלה ביום אחד יכול לרדת באותו יום כבר מהשוק, אז צריך להיות מאוד מאוד החלטיים ולבוא מפוקסים כשבאים לראות בתים. וזה מה שאני עושה. השלב הבא בשירות הוא, אני לא יכולה, אני לא יודעת מה יש למצגת שלי היום, אני ממש מתנצלת. אוקיי, השלב הבא בשירות שלי הוא הכנת הבית לכניסה. אז אני לא אפתח את המצגת, אני מצטערת, היא פשוט נתקעת לי. אז הכנת הבית לכניסה, זה פשוט לאפשר לכם לנחות באמת בבית, אתם צריכים אינטרנט, אתם צריכים ריהוט, אתם צריכים סופרמרקט, כי אתם נכנסים לבידוד עכשיו. כל מה שאתם צריכים בשביל לנחות כאילו ישירות בבית שלכם, אני אוספת את המפתחות, ואני נמצאת שם כדי לקבל את הדברים עבורכם. שירות נוסף שאני מציעה, הוא שירות של פתיחת חשבון בנק עם ברקליז, תוך 48 שעות. פתיחת חשבון בנק באנגליה, אני מניחה שזה רלוונטי להרבה מדינות זרות אחרות, אבל באנגליה זה באמת, זה לא סיפור פשוט, אני לא אומרת את זה סתם, יש המון רגולציות וכל מיני עניינים שלא מאפשרים פתיחה מיידית, לצורך פתיחת חשבון בנק פעם ראשונה באנגליה, גם חייבים לבוא לפגישה אישית. לא תמיד יש תורים קדימה, עכשיו עם הקורונה, לפעמים מקבלים תורים חצי שנה קדימה, אז אני מאוד מאוד שמחה שהצלחתי לייצר את השיתוף פעולה הזה עם ברקליז, ולאפשר ללקוחות שעומדים בתנאים מסוימים, כן, יש בדיקת התאמה מסוימת, לפתוח חשבון בנק תוך 48 שעות. השלב הבא זה בעצם לא שלב, זה בעצם באופן כללי, כל לקוח ממני מקבל תמיכה כללית לאורך כל הדרך. אני זמינה לכם בוואטסאפ לכל השאלות, אני עובדת יחסית בכל מיני שעות גם, כי אני עובדת עם אנשים שעוברים מאוסטרליה ומקנדה ומארצות הברית, אני די זמינה, אני נוטה להאמין מסביב לשעון, יעידו על כך ילדיי, ואני נותנת, במי שלקוח שלי הוא נכנס לקבוצת פייסבוק סגורה של לקוחות, שיש שם הרבה מאוד מידע רלוונטי, שחלקו אני אפילו מוכרת בנפרד למי שלא רוצה להיות לקוח, לקחת את השירותים הגדולים יותר, וביניהם זה צ'קליסט טרום מעבר, משימות שצריך לעשות לפני מעבר לאנגליה, איך סוגרים את הפינות בישראל, רשימת מסגרות חינוך יהודיות וכאלה שהן לא יהודיות, אבל כן עם ישראלים, הכל בלחיצת כפתור לדוחות פיקוח ובאמת, הוא הונגש בצורה הכי פשוטה שיכולתי. מידע על מיסוי, רשימת קנייה ראשונית, רוב הדברים שעלו פה כשעשיתי מרקט ריסרצ' לקראת פתיחת העסק, היה שהיום הראשון, הפעם הראשונה שהלכו לסופרמרקט, כאילו קצת נטרפה על אנשים דעתם, כי מאוד קשה להבין איך הסופר נראה, איך קוראים לדברים, מה התחליפים המקומיים, וגם זה יש לכם, ובאמת עוד מלא 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 דברים, רשימת קישורים לכל הדברים הכי בסיסיים באיך לעשות באנגליה, יש לי גם הנחות ללקוחות עם כל מיני נותני שירות בקהילה, מקסימים ומאממים ומוכשרים, בין אם זה חברות ניקיון, בין אם זה שפים, צלמים, הכל נמצא בקבוצה, והלקוחות שלי יכולים ליהנות ממנו. יש לי חבורת מומחים שאני עובדת איתם, באמת כולם אנשים ונשים באמת נפלאים, אין לי מה להגיד, מבחינתי בחרתי אותם בפינצטה, הם עומדים בסטנדרט שלי, והעיקרי שלי זה שהלקוחות שלי, וכשאני ממליצה עליהם, אני מעבירה להם אנשים, זה שאנשים יודעים שאם אני המלצתי עליהם, אז זה הברנד סטאמפ שלי. אני באמת מאמינה שמי שאני מפנה עליו, נותן את השירות הכי טוב שמישהו יכול לקבל. אז יש לנו את חגית צוקר שהיא פסיכולוגית חינוכית, יש לנו את סיוון בחרך, שעשינו איתה לא מזמן וובינר בנושא הכנת ילדים לרילוקיישן, אם אנשים לא צפו בזה, אתם מוזמנים להיכנס אל הדף ולקבוצה שלי, יש שם את הוידאו. סיוון היא מאמנת אישית ומאמנת הורים, יש לנו טלי ליכטנפלד שהיא מאמנת אישית ומאמנת רילוקיישן, בעיקר מתעסקת באימון זוגי, אני תכף אגע בטלי קצת יותר בהרחבה. יש לנו את אסתר לוין שהיא מתרגמת מקצועית ומוסמכת, היא מוכרת על ידי כל הגורמים שמבקשים תרגום מוסמך באנגליה. יש לנו את אפרת שמש הילדסון שהיא עורכת דין לענייני הגירה, שעוזרת לנו רבות. יש לנו את ויקטוריה היקרה, שהיא English Language and British Culture Coach. יש לנו את סיוון קון, שגם איתה עשינו ממש לא מזמן וובינר בנושא מיתוג תעסוקתי באנגלית, גם איתה הקלטה נמצאת אצלנו בדף העסקי ובקבוצה. יש לנו את אלי שהוא רואה חשבון ויועץ מס בינלאומי, הוא עוזר לאנשים בעיקר שבאים מישראל לגבי התיאום מס לגבי ישראל. יש לנו את ניצן ווינטר, שהיא יועצת פנסיה, השקעות, ביטוחים ורואת חשבון, שגם איתה אני תכף וגם בהרחבה על מה שהולך תכף לקרות איתה. ויש לנו את גיא שפר, שהוא יועץ הגירה מוסמך, גם הוא ואפרת, שניהם מאוד עוזרים לאנשים שמגיעים אליי, גם אם הם לקוחות וגם אם לא, אני תמיד שמחה להפנות אליהם, כי הם מוסמכים ובאמת עושים עבודה נפלאה בכל מה שקשור בתמיכה באנשים בשאלות הגירה. אז איפה אפשר למצוא אותנו? אז יש לי דף עסקי, אני חייבת לתת פה איזשהו גילוי נאות, שאני די לא בקיאה בעולם הסושיאל מדיה, אז אני פיתחתי דף עסקי, טיפחתי אותו ככה ממש ממש יפה, אבל גיליתי שהאלגוריתם של פייסבוק לא ממש מקדם דפים עסקיים. אז עם כל ההשקעה וכל הרצון הטוב, פתחתי קבוצת פייסבוק, כי פייסבוק יותר אוהב קבוצות, ואם אתם רוצים לראות את הדברים שאני מעלה, זה תכנים שקשורים גם לרילוקיישן, אבל גם לחיים באנגליה, אני מנגישה הרבה מאוד מידע שקשור לתרבות המקומית כאן, שגם אנשים שמקומיים נמצאים פה, אתם נותנים לי פידבקים נורא טובים, שהם לא היה להם מושג, וואי, לא ידענו את זה ואת זה ואת זה. אז אני ממליצה לכם, אני מאוד אשמח אם תצטרפו לקבוצה הזאת, תעזרו לקהילה שלי לגדול, הקבוצה קוראים לה Easy London Relocation London אנגליה, ולאט לאט אני אפסיק לפרסם בדף העסקי ואתחיל לעבור רק לקבוצה, זו הזדמנות גם שלכם לראות את כל הפרסומים לכל הוובינרס, כי למרות שיש אנשים שעוקבים אחריי, הם עדיין לא ראו את הפרסומים לוובינרס, אז אני מניחה שדרך הקבוצה זה יהיה הרבה יותר קל שוב בגלל האלגוריתם של פייסבוק, גם אינסטגרם הצטרף אליי ממש לא מזמן, הקבוצה נפתחה ממש אתמול, אז זה ממש חדש, האינסטגרם פתחתי די לא מזמן, גם כן לפני זה בערך חודש, אתם גם מוזמנים לעקוב אחרי באינסטגרם, זה דנה רילוקיישן UK. אז מה קורה עכשיו? Exciting things ahead. אז בחודש מאי יש לנו שני וובינרים, אני לוקחת קצת הפסקה באפריל מהוובינרס, ויש לנו שני וובינרים חשובים ומעניינים. הראשון הוא טיפים, אתגרים וטיפים לזוגות לקראת מעבר ותוך כדי המעבר, זה רלוונטי גם לזוגות מעורבים מקומיים, זה טלי, אמרתי לכם, היועצת, המאמנת הזוגית שמתמחה בזוגות ברילוקיישן, טלי תעביר את זה, ועוד וובינר נוסף במה יהיה על פנסיות ושיטות המיסוי המקומיות, סוגי ביטוחי חיים, קצבאות והקצבות מהמדינה, זה ניצן תעביר לנו, ניצן שהיא wealth consultant, בקיצור, רואת חשבון ויועצת לענייני מיסוי וביטוחי חיים, היא עתירה, היא מוסמכת לעשות את זה פה באנגליה, והיא ידע כרימון. אתם לא רוצים לפספס את האירועים האלה, אז כמו שאמרתי, אני ממליצה לכם להצטרף אל הקבוצה, אני גם פתחתי קבוצת וואטסאפ, אני מבטיחה שזו קבוצה בלי חפירות, היא סגורה לתגובות, היא רק כדי להעלות את הוובינר שלי, כדי שאנשים יוכלו, באמת שזה יגיע אליכם ולא תפספסו את זה. אז זה לגבי זה, והנה, שוב נתקעה המצגת, כבר היו לי ציפיות שיהיה בסדר. אז דבר נוסף שלקחתי בו חלק השבוע, ואני ממש מתרגשת לשתף פה את כולכם, הוא פחות קשור לעסק שלי, אבל הוא קשור לו בעקיפין, זה הקמתי ביחד עם שתי נשים מופלאות, עם אפרת שמש אידלסון ועם ליאת שומן, את פרויקט הנטוורקינג הנשי בממלכה. פתחנו קבוצה מאוחדות בממלכה לקידום עסקים ונשות מקצוע בממלכה, זה מתאים גם לסחירות, זה מתאים לכל מי שרוצה וצריכה, רוצה להתקדם מקצועית. המטרה היא ליהנות מההון האנושי שיש לנו פה, וללמוד אחת מהשנייה, ולעשות מאסטר קלאסס, ולעשות סדנאות, ולעשות וובינרס, בכל מיני נושאים, שכל הבנות ישתתפו, ובעצם ילמדו אחת את השנייה, ובעצם נעזור אחת לשנייה. אנחנו גרות באנגליה, אין לנו מעגל נטוורקינג רחב, אין לנו את החברות מהצבא, אין לנו את החברות מהתיכון, אין לנו את החברים שטיילנו איתם בדרום אמריקה. מה שיש לנו זה מה שאנחנו מייצרים פה. וזאת הפלטפורמה בשביל להתחבר. את הקבוצה הזאת פתחנו ממש אתמול, אני שמחה שהיא תופסת ככה תאוצה, והיא מתחילה, ואנשים מתחילים ככה להתחבר, ומתחילים את החיבורים העסקיים. אני מזמינה את כל האנשים פה שצופות בי להצטרף לקבוצה הזאת, ובואו נעבוד ביחד ככה כדי להתקדם. אז ככה, אז אני עכשיו סיימתי, ואני אספר לכם כמה דברים על ויקטוריה. אז 5 things you don't know about ויקטוריה. נו, מה יהיה עם המצגת הזאת? אני מתנצלת שוב, אני לא יודעת מה קורה. אז ככה, אז 5 things you didn't know about ויקטוריה. אני, נו, אז ככה. She grew up right in the center of London, and Sherlock Holmes was her neighbor. I wonder if you know where she lived. I'm assuming Baker Street. She once sang on stage at the Royal Albert Hall with a choir. Now she just sings in the shower. She loves walking London with her family and just exploring, learning history, looking up to discover what we've never noticed before. Actually, you can live in London, I'm assuming, for all your life and never actually finish exploring it. That's her second career, what she's doing now. She spent 12 years working in brand marketing in the healthcare and food industries, including Heinz, General Mills, and Boots. And finally, she's obsessed with tea, which is why her business is called Perfect Kappa English. So without further ado, I'm happy to give the stage to the lovely Victoria Reynoldson.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dana. That's an incredibly kind welcome. And hello, everybody. Lovely to have so many of you joining us today, this evening. And good evening, wherever you are, whether in Israel or in UK, or maybe we have some other people in different places joining by the Facebook group. And it's so lovely to see you all. And I'm really, really excited to be talking to you today about this topic of decoding the British, which is a topic I absolutely love talking about. So I'm just going to start by sharing my screen. If you've got any questions, either you're very welcome to put them in the chat, or feel free to unmute. I'll try and pause at various points just to check in if there are any questions. My apologies, I don't speak Hebrew, I'm so sorry. But maybe if somebody wants to put a question in Hebrew, maybe Dana, you could translate for me, or or feel free to ask me in English. That's absolutely, as you wish, no problems at all. So I'm just going to start by sharing my screen and just make sure everybody can see this. Okay, Dana, can you just nod to me to make sure that I can? Yeah, okay, good.
Yes.
So, Decoding the British, an introduction to relocating to the UK. And I put a lovely quote here, which is from a really famous London writer. London, it's a state of mind. And I think that really sums up what London is about for me. So what are we going to be covering today? We're going to be talking a little bit about how to meet and connect and chat with British people in social and work situations. It sounds like it should be very easy, but in fact, there are some certain things to know about the conversation rituals that happen in the UK. Also things that people will never tell you about, so they won't explain to you. So maybe some things about tipping, driving culture, what to wear for work. And then we'll get into some quite interesting aspects around, how do British people make requests and disagree with you? So maybe some of you have picked up already that there's a slightly different style perhaps in communication to perhaps the natural Israeli style. And then I'll finally come to top tips for relocating to the UK, and clearly I want to answer your questions. And finally, if you're going to stay all the way through with me and you can come through to the end of this webinar, then I have a special gift for you. Actually, I've got 2 gifts. So do stay on until the end, because I really want to share this with you and make sure you have the opportunity to get those gifts. So Dana's already explained a little bit about me, but just very briefly, because obviously I think I haven't met any of you before. I am an English communication and culture coach for international professionals. What that means is I help people who are relocating to the UK or working in international teams to improve and up-level their English communication and really, really understand British culture so that they can really connect with people and make really good relationships with those, or particularly work relationships, but also for everyday life as well. I quite regularly speak and write about these topics, as I am this evening. And my business, as Dana mentioned, is called Perfect Cuppa English. Just to explain, just in case you haven't come across this before, a cuppa is a British slang for a cup of tea, and I love my tea with milk, of course. And I've just recently had my birthday. The business is now 6 years old. And Dana also explained about my previous career, and actually this is where I first identified this idea of what I call the English communication gap. So even for people who work in English every day, there is often that kind of gap of understanding the nuances, the little differences that make that difference about how you communicate. And finally, as you can probably hear, I am British, I'm a Londoner, I grew up near Baker Street, and I currently live in West Hampstead, which is in northwest London. Okay, great. So let's get into the main presentation. So the first thing to say is that just think about your time in the UK. Oh, can I ask everybody to mute, please? Oh, is that a question or?
No.
Okay.
Oh,
please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's great. So the first kind of part of this is thinking about what is your purpose when moving to the UK. So it doesn't really matter whether you've been in, you're currently living elsewhere, you've been in the UK for a month, or whether you've been living here for several years. I always get people to think about this. You know, what is it you want to get out of your time in the UK? Now, obviously, for a lot of people, they would answer, well, I've got a job here. I'm moving because one of us or both of us have a job here in the UK. But that's not all of the picture. And I always really encourage people to think about, okay, so what is it you want to do? Do you want to learn new skills? Do you want to travel, take up a new hobby? What sort of social kind of goals do you want to have? And this is really important, because if you don't think about this at the start, time can go really quickly. So you might feel like you've got a lot of time, whether you're intending to come for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, but actually time can go quite fast. So I always really encourage people to think about what is your purpose, what is it you want to do with your time in the UK, and really plan around that. When it comes to meeting people, obviously at the moment, things are a little bit more restricted in terms of movement, but hopefully the UK is starting to ease up on restrictions and open up now. But I just want to provide a few brief ideas that I always share with my clients in terms of meeting people and connecting with British people. And I'm sure Dana has lots of other ideas as well. But first of all, think about if you've been to a particular university or college, look up if they have an alumni association here in the UK that you could be part of. Meetup is a really wonderful organisation, which at the moment are running all their kind of community meetups online. And if you have a particular passion or interest or hobby, you can use their search engine and find a group that's based in London, so you can meet other people based in London who are also interested in that same hobby or passion. When it comes to Facebook groups, obviously there are lots of Facebook groups out there. Just been hearing obviously about the Easy London, fantastic launches on Facebook and Instagram. So obviously a great place to network and meet people. But obviously there are lots of other sort of Facebook groups for mums and families. So for example, I live quite near to Hampstead. There's Hampstead Mums, which is a wealth of information about what's going on locally if you're interested for support for family life. When it comes to more on the networking side, obviously things like the UK Israel Business Network or the Chamber of Commerce are great places to start to meet people who might be able to help you with your career here in the UK. If you want to study and learn, if that's one of your purposes that you want to get out of your time here in the UK, then I highly recommend the City Lit, which is an adult education institute, where you can do anything and everything from singing to learning new languages to studying whatever you're interested in. But this is also another great way of meeting people who are based in London or in the UK. And it can be a really interesting way to meet people. And then finally, I just thought I'd mention, there's a really interesting international network called Focus, which is multinational. So if you're interested in meeting people from all over the world, then Focus might be an interesting place for you. So a couple of ideas, but I'm sure, as I say, Dana has lots of other ideas about where to meet British people and connect with them. And when you've actually met some British people, what do we actually talk about? Well, I don't know if this is something which you've noticed, but British people love to talk about the weather. And I often get asked this question, you know, why is this? Because, like, you know, the weather in the UK is really not that extreme. It's not that hot in the summer. It's certainly not as hot as Israel. And it's certainly not extremely cold climate here. And yet, the British are quite obsessed with the weather. It's something that's quite important to us. And I often say to people, it's like social glue. It's like the thing that kind of binds us. And I would say almost any conversation with a British person starts with the weather, whether you've just met them or if you've known them kind of almost all your life. And there's an amazing fact, in fact, that 40% of British people have spoken about the weather in the last hour, which to me is an amazing fact. I don't know how they measured it, but they apparently did, and that's an average. But you can sort of see how important it is. And the way we talk about the weather is in a particular way, which is what I wanted to share here with you today. So you can see here I've written a bit chilly, isn't it? Cold day, isn't it? So this is quite a common way to open up the conversation and talk about the weather. Obviously, you can adapt the front bits if it ends up being warm or even nice weather. But what's quite interesting is the reply is also pretty standard, and the answer is always yes. So even if you totally disagree and you think the weather isn't that cold, we tend to agree with each other. So, you know, go along with the flow of the conversation. And then we like to add on our own weather facts and build up the conversation this way. So I might say, for example, oh yes, and I heard it's actually going to snow next week, which apparently is true when it's been super nice weather this week. So you can sort of see, like, we build this kind of weather chat up, and it is an important aspect. So even if you're not that interested about talking about the weather, just go for it. You'll find it actually is quite a good way to kind of build the connection. And then when it comes to small talk, I would say, again, there are some rituals around the conversation of small talk which are quite important to British people. So you know, clearly small talk isn't uniquely British. Small talk happens everywhere around the world, but the way we do it is, I think, specific. So this question, how are you? How do we answer this question? Well, I think we answer it with a very kind of standard answer, which is fine, how are you? And this is even if we are feeling dreadful, like even if we're feeling absolutely horrible, the fish died, I hurt my finger, I lost my job, I'm not going to start complaining about it. So at the beginning of the conversation, it's really important you follow this kind of ritual, which is, you know, how are you? Fine, how are you? Yeah, fine. And it really is a ritual, even amongst friends. But, you know, obviously, if you do know somebody better, you can obviously say you're not feeling so good. But we do this in a really understated way. So we might say something like, I'm a bit under the weather, which means, you know, I'm not feeling so good. And we don't really go into the detail unless we're asked. So we're not big kind of, British people are not very big at sharing all the details of their lives. You'll find people can sometimes be a bit private, apart from certain situations, which I'll talk about in a minute. And the only exception I have found, well, two exceptions, in fact. One are parents. So if you go to the playground with children, you'll find people are a bit more open and willing to chat. And the other area is dog owners. So interestingly, dog owners are very, very chatty and quite friendly as well, and like to kind of have their own little kind of community. So if you're a parent or you own a dog, then it's good news. It's an easy way to have small talk. And in fact, if you don't own a dog, there's a brilliant website apparently called Borrow My Doggy, where you can like borrow somebody's dog for like an hour or something. And so maybe that might be a good idea in terms of meeting people. So I'm just going to pause there because I think there might be some comments. I'm just going to have a I don't know if Dana, if there's anything particular, any questions. Let's have a quick look at the chat. Okay, so it looks like it's just some comments. So I'm just going to continue unless anybody's got any particular questions.
Yes. Someone was just asking, oh yeah, she does give, okay, we'll talk about it later. Okay,
no problems at all. No problems at all. Okay, great. So moving from the small talk side of things, let's talk about humor. British humor, right? Now, I don't know whether you've come across this, but British humor is quite particular. And I kind of did a bit of a Google search on British humor, and some things came up which were, you know, some people say, oh, it's so confusing. Other people say it's frustrating. You don't know whether, you know, British people are being funny or they're not being funny. Infuriating, which is like, you know, makes you a bit sort of angry. And actually, the British have this reputation sometimes of having a stiff upper lip. This means that they don't show emotion. I'm not sure that's actually always true, but I think the humour can be a little bit hard sometimes to decode. And I think this quote really sums it up for me, which I found, which is, you know, the problem with the English is you never know when they're joking or being serious. And this is something which sometimes is hard to kind of understand, because what will happen is somebody is showing a really serious face, even in a work situation. They appear to be saying something a little bit sarcastic, a little bit funny. So how do you understand this? Well, humour is a really big topic. And I'll be honest with you, I could literally do a whole webinar on humour, British humour, and I have done. But just a few tips. If you want to really, really understand British humour, the best thing to do is to watch it. So look, I mean, obviously there are lots and lots of suggestions when it comes to British humour. I'm sure some of you have also kind of like watched different programmes, but I thought I'd share with you some of the kind of like, you know, fun ones, that my personal favourites as well, which I think are really great ways to understand that British humour style. So from a work point of view, The Office is actually a bit of an older one. It's about 20 years old now, amazingly. But this is quite a good one to understand workplace humour, and the very subtle type of humour of body language and looks. W1A is a more recent one, set again, more workplace humour, but actually hilarious. And what's very funny about it is it's filmed inside the BBC. It's about a BBC management team being very ineffective and their little kind of arguments. But it's actually kind of like the BBC making fun of itself. And I think that's a very typical type of British humour. Fleabag, very popular one from a couple of years ago, about single female life in London and love and all that goes with it. And then some older ones, Absolutely Fabulous and Alan Partridge. I'm sure you have all your own favourites. I'm sure you've heard of some other ones like Monty Python, some older ones like this. But I really encourage you, if you want to get British humour, the best thing to do is to watch it. And if your English isn't so strong, I would highly recommend you put on the English subtitles. That's a really good way of watching and understanding as well what's kind of going on. Okay, so moving on from the funny stuff, let's talk about food. And I actually really want to talk about food because often I ask the questions to people and say, okay, so what's British food about? And I hear fish and chips and Sunday roast and, you know, shepherd's pie and all sorts of things like, you know, sponge pudding. And of course, this is like traditional British food. And of course it exists. And there's some really good traditional British food. But you don't want to eat that every day. Like, people in the UK don't eat English breakfast every day. We would be enormous if we did, right? So the point is, you know, there's some really good traditional dishes, but I wanted to bring up all these amazing images of contemporary multicultural cuisine in the UK, because that's the brilliant thing about like the UK. You can really access all types of food from all over the world. And I'm going to be a little bit sort of provocative. Actually, we have some really good sparkling wine. So actually, it sounds a bit weird, but now the climate's getting warmer, like the champagne houses in France are buying up lands in England to plant their grapes and develop the champagne grapes. So watch out for English wine. I think it's coming up. White wine, yeah. Red wine, don't drink it. It's too cold to grow that yet. But I suppose, yeah, the point is here that, you know, there's a wealth of British food to explore. And even at the moment, with all the restaurants that are still closed here in the UK, there's amazing kind of takeaway options. And every single restaurant now does delivery, from, you know, the most basic to the Michelin star restaurants as well. A couple of things to tell you about eating in the UK. Service probably will feel quite slow compared to Israel. I understand in Israel the service is pretty good. Once the restaurants open again, it's not a big deal here to wait like half an hour for your food. So, you know, if that's something you're not used to, don't worry about it. Perhaps order a starter or order some snacks to eat while you're waiting. And the other thing to say, which is something I was laughing with Dana about earlier, is that we eat quite early here in the UK. So children eat really quite early, often sometimes even like 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock. And in terms of going out for a meal, I would say the kind of peak time is probably like 7:30, 8 o'clock. So that may be a little bit earlier than you're used to. So often the reservations are often very busy at this time. So I'm just going to pause there and check in if anybody's got anything they want to either share about British food or experiences, or any questions they've got about British food.
I have a question.
Sure, go for it.
Hi, my name is Lee. I'm a graphic designer. I would like to know about the tipping. How much is it customary to tip?
Absolutely. Actually, do you know what? We're going to come on to tipping, but let me answer that question now. Thanks for that question, Lee. Really good question. So in the UK, tipping culture isn't actually that big. We only kind of tip in certain situations. Restaurants actually have a particular policy, which is they add on, as most restaurants add on as standard, a 12.5% service charge, and that's automatically added to your bill. Most British people would pay that unless it was absolutely terrible meal. So they normally accept it, and that would be it. Occasionally, if you felt like you had exceptional service, you might leave a few coins as tips for the staff separately. But the idea of the service charge is that goes towards the restaurant, and sometimes it goes to the staff as well. But tipping isn't sort of a very big culture here, I'd say, separately from the main bill. So hopefully that answers your question. But also, just to let you know, like in bars and pubs, if you're just having a drink or you're just having coffee, we don't tend to tip. Isn't normal. Okay. So moving on from food, I'm actually going to talk about drinking because one of the things I always ask everybody is, so tell me, are the British big drinkers or aren't they? Well, I think the British have a bit of a reputation, and certainly on a summer's day, in normal times before coronavirus, maybe on a Thursday afternoon from about 4 o'clock or Friday afternoon, you probably see a pub looking like this. People all on the pavements, drinking, sometimes smoking. So, you know, pubs are very popular places. But what I would say is actually there's quite a shift in culture going on in the moment. So actually, the statistics say that there's a really big trend increasing, or particularly young people not drinking at all. So actually, you know, in terms of going to the pub, don't feel like, you know, alcohol is the end game. Pubs are really important places in terms of social contact. So if you are working in an office or with a team and in normal times they invite you to the pub, I highly, highly recommend you go, because this is where people open up. They're a bit more relaxed. They'll tell you a bit more about their personal lives and what's going on for them. So I do really recommend, it's a really important place to go to find out, you know, more about your colleagues and what they're like. In terms of what to drink, I mean, clearly most pubs in London serve anything and everything, but just in terms of what do the British drink and what is popular at the moment, local breweries are making a really big comeback here. So this means like beers that are brewed actually really locally. For example, near me, there's Camden Brewery. And that's really fantastic because it's supporting local independent businesses as well as really fantastic flavored beers if you're into that. Gin is nothing new. I'm sure it's a big thing in Israel as well, but gin is really popular here from all the different flavors and different types and brands out there. And then finally, I wanted to mention that the other growing trend, which is particularly for those of you who don't drink alcohol, is the non-alcoholic spirits. So something like Seedlip has no alcohol at all, but is drunk with a mixer and is more of a grown-up kind of cocktail, non-alcoholic cocktail. And finally, hopefully at some point soon, the pubs will reopen. I think it is in the next month. If you go to the pub, generally people, if you're with a group of people, we tend to buy in rounds. And what that means is one person goes to the bar and buys for everybody else. Clearly, if you're in a really big group, normally we might sort of split into subgroups. And normally you would just say what you want. You can have an alcoholic drink or a non-alcoholic drink. But what would happen is if you need to leave before you've had the chance to buy a round for everybody else, you just remember that for next time. And the next time you go out, you buy the round for everybody. Okay. So that's a little bit about drinking. Now, queuing. I want to mention queuing because queuing is also, I think, a really interesting one. And, you know, I put this really funny picture here, which I found because I don't think you ever see a queue like this in London for a bus stop. It just doesn't look like that. But queuing is still quite important. And what I would say is, even though there are no like formal queues at bus stops like this, people do have quite a good idea who's come before them and who came after them. So just be really aware when you get into situations where you're waiting for something, whether it's a bus, the tube, whatever it might be, just be a little bit aware about the people around you, because people can get a bit frustrated if they feel like you're trying to kind of cut into the queue. And I put this picture here because the other big thing about London, obviously sadly not at the moment, but usually is that people love like non-reservation places. They love to get in the queue. It's quite a social thing, chatting to people in the queue, and they love to kind of queue up for whatever it might be. So for example, Wimbledon's a tennis competition that happens usually every summer. Wimbledon is something where you can queue up on the day to kind of get tickets in the afternoon, and that's a really big social event, queuing up for the tickets in the afternoon or queuing up early morning to see if there are any kind of spare tickets. Tipping culture. So I did actually put something here, Lee, but yeah, so other areas that we could actually talk about where tipping comes in. As I said earlier, it's not really, we don't have that many areas where we tip, which is quite interesting, really. What I would recommend is, as I mentioned, in restaurants, the service charge is normally 12.5%, and that's usually automatically added to your bill. When it comes to something like hairdressers or spa treatments, it's usual to give them a tip of about 10%. And I would say for taxis, I would only usually kind of round up, if I was going a short journey, like round up to the nearest pound. But if you're going for a long journey, let's say you're taking a taxi from central London out to the airport, I would probably put on like a 10% tip then. And then finally, when it comes to hotel porters, I would normally give about £2 is the going rate for that. But to be honest with you, those are really the only kind of places where we tend to tip. So, you know, people coming to your home to fix things, we wouldn't normally tip them. Drinks, I mentioned, we wouldn't normally tip in this place. But what I would say is please and thank yous are quite important. And I don't mean that to sound patronising, but actually, statistically, the British use the word please and thank you much more frequently than any other culture, really fascinatingly. They did a study, and actually it was even higher than, say, something like Japanese culture, which is obviously also known for being incredibly polite. So I would say that, you know, even if you're not tipping, this whole thing about please and thank you is really, really important here. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're feeling challenged, or you're feeling like actually, you know, it's not, you know, things are not going your way, if you use please and thank you, it's amazing how you can get around people. So I'd really kind of recommend that as quite key words. See a couple of chat things, comments in the chat. Delivery services, Michael. Good. So do you mean like food delivery? Just to check.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So food delivery, actually not normally. I think it's given as a high. It's given as an, I think you can add a tip normally when you're on the app, but actually I would say a lot of people don't do that. It's not considered the normal thing to do. So yeah, interestingly, it's not kind of standard culture.
And how about delivery guys that give you food from restaurants?
No, yeah. So usually on like on the app, sometimes they give you the option to add on a tip when you order. But I would say most people don't actually add a tip, and most people don't tip the person when they come.
Okay, thank you.
No worries at all.
I have a question. When people move your house, movers come over, do you tip them?
No, but you tip them in other ways. So what I mean
like
by
a beer?
No, well, actually, you're close. It's tea and biscuits. So just to let you know, when you're moving house, the guys who, sorry, this sounds very sexist, it's normally men. There are some women removers as well. But what is expected is that you provide plenty of tea and coffee. Normally, make sure you have lots of milk in. They normally like it quite milky. And they also like loads of sugar. Like I've literally, last time I moved house, I think the guy wanted like 5 sugars in his coffee. I was like, really? And the other thing is get in some biscuits. They don't have to be really fancy ones, like, simple biscuits. But again, removers really, really appreciate that. And that's what they really appreciate more than anything else.
Thank you. There's another question. And if delivery from supermarket,
no,
and if you had an awful service, do you still
okay, so that's really interesting. So
supermarket, no, we don't tip. Okay.
No, we don't tip. And so if you have awful service in a restaurant, what I would usually do, again, this is a certain British way of saying things. So normally what I would do is I would say to the server, because the server, again, let's think about normal times, having a restaurant meal, and somebody comes over to you and say, how's your meal? If I really, really felt strongly, I would say, do you know what? Actually, today I was a little bit disappointed. Now, that might not sound very strong to you, but to a British person, this is really strong negative feedback. So, look, if you say it this way, I was a little bit disappointed today, the server will be really worried. And actually, they will actually be reacting to that and then going, I'm so sorry, what can I do about it? And of course, if you're not, and if you say that, you can say, look, I'm really sorry, I'm not prepared to pay the service charge today. I don't want to pay that today. So you have the option not to pay it. The other thing is, if you experience extreme really bad, you have a really, really bad experience, whether it's to do with the service or the food, you can of course ask to speak to the manager. But this would be for British people quite an extreme situation, like you had it absolutely, it was like almost like the worst experience you've ever had. So generally, people are quite accepting. It doesn't mean you have to be, but just be aware about how you give that feedback if you're not happy with your meal. Okay, so I hope that answers the questions. So I'm just going to quick look. Okay.
There's I thought that I knew the answer, but just in case, do we usually tip on credit cards, or is it you usually need to do it with cash? How do we do it?
Good point, very good point. So when it comes to restaurants, as I say, service charge is automatically added. Most hairdressers and beauty places actually prefer you to tip in cash. Occasionally they can't, they'll say, I'm so sorry, we can't take that tip on the credit card. So they kind of prefer it in cash. Hotel porters, definitely cash. Taxi drivers definitely will put it on the credit card. They allow you to do that, to add a tip on. Okay, gosh, this is interesting. Lots of questions. Okay, good. I see a thumbs up.
If this food is really bad, is returning it is the most rudest thing ever.
It can be, yeah. Well, is it the rudest thing ever? I think you can honestly say, look, I'm really disappointed with this. It really isn't good. Is there any chance I could have something different? And please, don't feel like, from what I'm saying, you can't stand up for your rights and say, I don't like it. But all I just want to say is just be aware about how you say it, and just kind of be, just kind of go, look, today was not great. Can I please choose something else, or could I just return this? I don't want to have it. And, you know, be really clear in your feedback.
And apologize a million times.
Well, that's the interesting thing. You know, when it comes to kind of giving negative feedback, and we're going to go into this in a little bit, but this idea of saying sorry at the beginning of your sentence isn't actually you apologizing. So just to make sure you understand, the word sorry has lots of different meanings in British. It can mean, obviously, to apologize, but it also has the meaning of, I'm about to tell you something unpleasant, or I'm about to give you negative feedback. So just to let you know that you might hear British people say it a lot, particularly in a situation when they're about to disagree with you or tell you something bad. And that's all it means. It doesn't mean they're genuinely sorry in a situation. It's just like almost like imagine it like a flag, like a kind of flag word to help with the conversation.
Cool, thank you.
No worries. So moving on from tipping culture, let's talk about driving culture briefly. So a couple of things. I'm sure Dana gives you loads of details on this, but you're allowed to drive on your on your Israeli driving license for a year, but then you'll need to take the test and get a provisional license. So be aware of that. The congestion charge, really briefly on this. If you drive into central London, you have to pay £15. It's applicable pretty much always, almost every single day of the year. So you have to pay it on the weekends, and do make sure you pay it before you go in, or within, I think it's 24 hours. Otherwise, you get a big fine. And you can just set up like a special charge where it just automatically charges you, which is probably the easiest thing to do. A couple of things about driving in London. I don't know how driving in Israel is, but I would say London is actually fairly polite most of the time. Occasionally people get a bit aggressive, but watch out for the bikes. They're not loads of motorbikes, but there are a few, and they tend to be a bit crazy and all over the place. So yeah, make sure you're aware of that when you're driving. The other thing to say is, I don't know, again, how narrow roads are, but some of the roads even in London, I know this is a picture of the countryside, but even in London, some of the roads are super narrow, particularly when you get cars parked on either side. So just be aware that, you know, we have a bit of etiquette going on where you have to find your way of like stopping and waiting, letting the other person through, coming through the next bit, which might be something which is perhaps not so normal for you. But the other thing as well is that if we do, if somebody does allow us through, we tend to do this kind of little sign, which I don't know if, again, sometimes this does translate culturally, sometimes it doesn't, where we kind of acknowledge the other driver and say, you know, thanks, even just through the windscreen, or sometimes people flash their lights briefly as a thank you for being let through. And it's considered the normal thing to do. So if I let somebody through and they don't acknowledge me, they don't, you know, wave a little bit or flash their lights, I'm like, that's so rude. And of course, I'll never see this person again. And in some ways, it doesn't really matter. But it is a bit of the kind of British culture to do this, which is why I wanted to explain it.
Someone is asking about the bicycles.
Oh, okay. So what's the question about bicycles?
Stav, do you want to come off mute and share with us what you want to ask?
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes.
I can hear you fine, Stav.
Hi, thank you for having us as well. I wanted to ask, like, is it okay to ride a bicycle? And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the only thing to say,
if there's a lot of traffic as well, so
yeah,
it's safe, is it okay?
Yeah, so in terms of cycling culture, so specifically, I think it's a great question. I think cycling is getting better all the time. London used to be a very good city for cycling, and there are places where you can go hire a bike. They're just, you know, you put in a coin and you get the bike out of the rack and you just go. The only thing I would say is those bikes are a bit basic, and like the only thing you need to be aware of is that cars sometimes are really good about driving around bicycles, sometimes they're not. And going back to narrow roads, you know, sometimes there are bicycle lanes and it's really well done, and sometimes there aren't. So you just have to be really aware. If you're going to cycle in London, One, I highly recommend you wear a helmet. I know it sounds really basic, but actually there are lots of accidents that do happen. And the other thing I would say in London particularly is be really aware of trucks and lorries, because there's been accidents where they're turning and they hadn't seen bikes. So you just need to be really, if you're a really confident cyclist, you're very used to that, all of that, no problem, then go for it. The other thing to say is that if you want to get more confident, I think a lot of councils these days, I know my local one does in Islington, offer free bicycle learning courses, so you can go for free and learn, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's all around the UK to promote healthy lifestyle and reduce carbon emission. Yes. So yeah.
Perfect. Good. Great question, Sav. Now, I'm just going to briefly talk about the royal family and royal family culture, because it is something I get asked a lot of questions about. And I suppose, obviously we have, pictures, the Queen looking really happy and celebrating weddings recently and jubilees and so on. And we have Will and Kate getting married and having lots of babies. And then, of course, we've had all recently the stuff about Harry and Meghan and racism in the royal family and Oprah Winfrey interview. I don't know if you follow all this. I don't know how big a deal it is in Israel or not. I completely get if it isn't a big deal. But I suppose all I was going to say about this really briefly is royal family, generally, people either love the royal family in the UK or they don't really care. But they love it when they get an extra holiday for a wedding or because somebody's getting married in the royal family. It's quite unusual to come across people who really hate the royal family and will openly talk about it. But people are always open to talk about it, and you can ask questions. And what are all these statistics here? Well, I suppose what I was going to say is, regardless of what people think about, Will and Kate or Harry and Meghan or whatever their opinion is, there's a lot of respect for the Queen. And these are the reasons why. Like, she's been on the throne for 69 years. This woman has been working hard. She has 2 birthdays, amazingly. She has her private birthday, her original birthday, and then she has like a state national celebration, which is normally in June. She's seen 14 prime ministers, including Winston Churchill, and 14 US presidents, which I think is actually quite amazing, and 7 popes, and so the Pope in Rome. And she's had apparently 30 corgi dogs, which are those little dogs that she loves. So I think, the point is, and why I'm sharing all this is, feel free to ask your questions to British people. As I say, most people, you'll probably either love them or feel, that they're okay. People quite like the glamour of it. They like to see what, Kate is wearing, Meghan's wearing. And so, yeah, so regardless of, what your questions are, feel free to ask them. I'm sure people will be happy to talk about it. Now, let's get into, I'm just conscious of time. Are we okay, Dana? So I'm going to just let you know, I'll probably be about another sort of 10, 15 minutes, something like this. Is this okay?
No worries.
Okay,
cool.
I'm
enjoying every second of it, so go for it. As more the more than I can learn. Go.
Good. Fantastic. Well, I hope everybody can stay. I'm apologising, we're slightly running over 8, but I'm happy to stay. And if you've got more questions, I'm always happy to have the conversation. And don't forget, I've got my little gifts for you at the end, everyone. So I do hope you can stay. So let's get into some British speak and how do British people actually talk. So this is the thing I want to share with you, which is about making requests. So British people tend, and I say tend because this means usually, it's not absolutely everybody, but usually people make requests in a certain way, and they tend to use lots of words, and they tend to do it in quite a polite and soft way. And when they make that request, it may sound like you have an option to say yes or to say no. But I would say that sometimes when you hear these phrases that you see on the screen at the moment, you may not have an option. In fact, particularly in a work context, some of these questions actually mean you need to do something, which is why I want to highlight it to you. So if somebody says, would you mind? So for example, would you mind sending me the report? They probably mean, please, can you do that now? If somebody says to you, do you have a minute? they want to talk to you, then that means yes, of course, is the normal answer to that. And likewise with all of these kinds of types of questions. So even though they sound very soft, even though they are being framed as questions where it sounds like you've got the option to say no, most of the time the person is expecting you to say a yes, to give a positive answer. So I explain that because that style of communication, I think, is quite different from other languages sometimes where the communication style can be more direct. Likewise, and please and thank yous, again, really important when it comes to making requests. Excuse me. So likewise, when it comes to giving feedback, and this is a particular area that I know that particularly when I think about sort of Israeli communication style, I worked with Israelis in the past, and thinking about British people, sometimes this is where the area becomes a bit different. And this idea of, what do you think of the proposal? What do you think of the idea? If somebody's not sure about that, they're unlikely to tell you directly that, because there are lots of different reasons that drives it. And I just want to explain this because you might hear a really positive message in response, and you might think, fantastic, this person loves my idea, they love my proposal, they love my work. But in fact, they're giving you negative feedback. And it might be so subtle that you don't really pick up on it. So I'm going to share with you a couple of those techniques and how it's done with some example kind of phrases. But what I would say is, why do we do it? And why is it not just said the way it is? Well, there are a couple of really big drivers for this. And what's really fascinating is the research says is that British people often feel like that by criticizing your idea, they feel like they're criticizing you as a person. So there's no separation between the person and the idea. So it feels really personal to say, I don't like your idea, which is why people don't often do it. So I think that's kind of quite interesting. The other aspect of it is that actually there's a real sense in the UK of, there's a phrase which is to not rock the boat. What that means is we don't tend to show lots of strong emotions in work situations. We don't tend to kind of show really strong disagreement, or even actually, to be honest with you, very strong agreements as well. So what you might find is somebody sitting there and they're nodding and smiling and giving you really positive signals, but actually you have to listen to the words to really understand what's going on. So let me show you some of those examples, and I'm going to pause off this because there may be some questions after this. So how do people disagree and say no? So the first technique, which I think is quite famous, but it is true, it is absolutely what British people sometimes do, is that they're sort of listening really clearly, intently to what you're saying. And they're going, yeah, interesting, good, yeah. But, and they pause, and then the real opinion comes. And that's the important bit, is you need to pay attention to what comes after the but. And that will help you understand what the real feedback is. Another technique, which I think is quite similar, is where somebody will acknowledge your opinion and then the but comes. So an example of this, in the first example I put here, is I can see where you're coming from. Similarly, they might say, I can hear where you're coming from. I know what you mean. But, and again, what I would say there is you're focusing on the words that come after the but. Then, now this one particularly confuses because, again, it's kind of asking a question and it sounds incredibly soft, like they're asking permission to feed back to you. So somebody might say, could I make a suggestion? And what you need to know is when somebody says this, this is a request. They're not making a suggestion, they're telling you what you need to do next. So let's pretend I'm working on I have no idea, a design project, and I say, could I make a suggestion? Could you please think about the colours? I'm not asking you to think about the colours, I'm asking you to change them. So that's what the translation of that means. And likewise, if the phrases like what about, or how about, or perhaps we should, these all sound quite soft, but they are kind of directional feedback, and you should pay attention to what is being given to you as what seems to be a suggestion. And then finally, I talked about the word sorry. I have called it apologizing technique. I mean, in reality, it's not apologizing. It is just used as a linguistic flag to say, here comes a negative opinion. So if somebody says sorry or I'm afraid, they really are saying like, okay, this is the part you need to pay attention to. This is kind of where my opinion is. So I'm just going to pause there because I know that sometimes kind of brings up some questions for people. And just check in, Donna, I don't know if you don't mind just letting me know if there's anything particularly anybody wanted to know.
People were just saying about the royal family a little bit, saying that it was all over the news in Israel.
Right.
And then Michal was asking, is there a question or phrase that would encourage honest feedback?
That's a really interesting question. I think it depends on how well you know the person. So I would say if you don't know the person very well, I think you have to go quite gently. So you might say, so let's pretend you think you've heard something. That means you need to change it. What I would use is some sort of clarifying phrase. So I would say something like, so just to confirm, you would like me to, or so just to kind of play back what I've heard, I'm going to now go and do this. So I would use that type of clarifying language. If you're not sure, you know, despite, obviously it's not necessarily about understanding the English words, it's understanding the actual intended message. If you're not really sure, just clarify. Find different ways to just kind of say, can I just check with you what you want me to do, or what should happen next is. So don't be afraid to use that type of language just to confirm and see what's kind of going on. If you're not really sure and you come away from an interaction, you think, wow, I'm lost. I literally don't know what am I meant to do now? Then again, use that type of language in an email. So just follow up an email. And sometimes people are better on email. Or if you're in a group meeting and you feel people are being vague, which means, you know, they're not being clear, then don't be afraid to like phone up one of the people after the or jump on a Zoom or a call with one of the people and just say, you know what, I was a bit confused by the messaging there. Can I just confirm with you? And you'll find sometimes people are more honest one-to-one. So that would be my technique in this situation, because sometimes people don't want to be that open in front of the group, particularly if it's a difficult, challenging situation. So I hope that answers your question.
Michal, yeah, does it answer your question? You can put in the chat box or just come off mute. Also, there's another question. So how would you know if someone really asks you a question? I mean, if it's not a request, when do you can tell if he's actually asking for your opinion, or if it's a yes or no question? How do you differentiate?
I think that's a bit tricky. I do understand that's quite a tricky one to follow. I mean, again, just use clarifying language, you know, play back and just say, so just to confirm, you would like me to let you know about X, or just to check you want my opinion at this stage. So, you know, don't be afraid, you know, I mean, I understand saying I don't understand is not positive. So, you know, don't use that phrase. There are lots of alternative ways. And, you know, that's something definitely I teach, you know, I work with people in my programs to help them with, is using this type of clarifying language, and you're having different options on that. So, you know, you have a kind of almost like a bank of different phrases you can use, and you feel quite comfortable and confident to be able to do that in the moment.
Makes sense. I have a question for you, for myself. I have a feeling you're going to touch with it about it in your email sections. Are we having an email section?
Do you know what? I decided today, I was kind of conscious it was going to be a huge webinar. We haven't got loads on the web email, so do, you know, shoot with your question now then. I
wonder if, because you can't hear the tone of the person when they email you, if these kind of like phrases are being written down, do they mean the same thing?
That is such a good question. So there's an amazing statistic that I think up to 50% of emails are misunderstood. So people don't understand the tone of voice because, of course, it's missing. So what I would say is British people do quite like writing emails. They like to write lots of emails and quite short. So I would always say, you know, if you're not sure what is being said in the email, like what is the tone of voice, how is it, you know, actually, you know, what are they trying to say? Don't be afraid. Again, pick up the phone or jump on a call and just ask that question. So for me, that's quite important, because I think when I kind of actually train people and coach people in email, being really clear and professional emails, I always say you need to start with tone. Before you even write anything and think about the content, you need to start with the tone first and think about how you're writing it, not just what you're writing, and quickly, you know, get that message out.
Yeah, fab. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Great. Well, it's great to have loads of really good questions. So thank you for those. Okay, I'm going to briefly talk about story.
Sorry, I think someone just raised their hand. Mia,
Sure.
I'm assuming it's you, Efrat? Efrat, is it you? You raised your hand?
Yeah, it's me. Just one comment, and at the same time a question. I'm sorry I haven't met you 5 years ago.
Oh, no worries.
But I have to say that I'm in the same office in the last 2 weeks, in the last 2 years, in the same law firm, and I kind of, people just got used to me. When I say I disagree, people are not offended. They just got used to the Israeli girl who says, okay, guys, I disagree. Let's discuss it.
Yeah.
So I think also the British people adjust to the immigrants.
Absolutely. And sorry, I should have explained that. That's a really, really good point, which is, this is always a choice, right? Like, I'm not saying to you, sorry, perhaps I wasn't really being very clear. You don't necessarily need to take what I'm saying today as you have to change everything about what you do. In fact, I think the reason why I talk about this topic is that for me, it's quite important that you understand what others are doing. So what, you know, in certain situations, what British people are trying to do and what might be driving that communication style. For me, in terms of you guys as Israelis, it's always a choice. There's a choice, which is, I think it's about, either you can reflect the style if you want to in certain situations, but you don't have to, clearly not. It can also just be about explaining your style. So I often say to people, if you have a more direct and frank way of giving feedback or disagreeing with somebody, I would absolutely kind of frame it in a way which sort of says, listen, I'm just going to give, you know, my natural style is to give quite direct feedback. So I'm going to do that if you don't mind in this situation. And that is totally like fine. Also, bear in mind that when I talk about British culture, I mean, my goodness, we're talking about millions and millions of people, right? So we can only talk in generalizations. And clearly, there are some professions and sectors and industries which are, you know, much more direct. So if you go to the finance world, for example, which is very influenced by American culture, you would find a much more direct style, and definitely lots of disagreements and people being much more direct and straightforward. But what I suppose the reason why I talk about this topic is, particularly if you're working with a lot of British colleagues in an environment, then it helps in terms of interpreting what's going on around you. And then it becomes down to a personal choice, whether you want to explain how you work and why you do the ways you do things, or whether you want to adapt only in certain situations. Clearly, I would never want to sit here and tell you to say, you know, you need to change fully what you're doing or your personality in any way. So thank you for raising that point. That's a really, really valuable point to make.
May I ask something, please? Is it okay? 2 or 3 questions.
Sure, David. Hi.
Hi, Victoria. First of all, I really enjoyed it so far, so thank you very much.
Great, good.
And yeah, I noticed that I don't go out much because I'm writing a PhD. I'm stuck at home for many years before the lockdown began. But I've been to a few meetups with British people, and I noticed one thing that was very clear is that they're not as open as Israelis. Like you said, weather and all of that, but they don't talk about themselves, about personal issues, or so. I think I cannot be too specific, but I'm trying to find out what are the limits of openness, or is it okay to speak about politics or about my personal life, or what? I know it's a very general question, but
No,
what lines? Sorry.
Yes.
So.
It's a very good question. So you're absolutely right. So to answer that question, there is a bit of a barrier sometimes people find, and they kind of go, you know what, it's sometimes really hard to get to know people. And what I would say is people can, they are generally friendly on the surface, but particularly in a work context, people often have a bit of a limit about sharing about their personal lives. So the kinds of things people are, happy to talk about are, as you've talked about, the weather, fairly kind of general topics, talking about, what did you do on the weekend? Sometimes people, when you bring up the weekend, might talk about their personal life. You find out a bit more about their family life. But some people are very, very private about that. And so a real separation between work and family. What I would say, interestingly, is when these barriers come down, I think personally there are sort of two areas where they do happen. One is when we're all physically working together in an environment, if you're ever in that situation, the kitchen or wherever the coffee machine is the place where conversation more happens, because a lot of people make tea. You need to wait for the kettle to boil to make tea. You can't, tea from a machine is horrid. So actually you've got that time, and that's when people start talking and start being a bit more open. And then the other time is in the pub. So that's why if you're invited to the pub, please, try and make every effort to go, because that's where people just will chill out a bit more and be a bit more open about their lives and tell you a bit more about also what's going on in the office, what's happening at work, like, what are colleagues up to, who's going for promotion, and all of this kind of stuff, which is quite important as a bonding kind of experience.
So if it's a meetup, not a workplace,
okay,
so I can be a little bit more open, but
absolutely. But the only thing you mentioned, of politics is actually really avoided in this country as a topic to talk about. Like occasionally somebody might bring it up, but everybody's a bit awkward about it, because particularly when it comes to something like, I don't know, like Brexit, which was really divisive in the UK, like massively divisive. And, people had very different views, and generally I would say London was generally against Brexit, but not everybody was. Most people would just generally not talk about politics, apart from maybe a general kind of comment like, oh, the government, but then not really getting into big kind of discussion about it.
Okay, thank you very much. And two more questions, if I may,
Sure.
Really short questions. So this one is a little bit silly, but
go for it.
Some people, instead of how are you, as most of us know, the ones who live in the UK, they ask, are you right? Are you right? And I don't know how to answer this question.
Good point. That's really interesting. Like my feeling was that this is coming out of fashion, but interestingly, I do get questions about this. So what they say is all right, with a question mark, and what it means is it has the same meaning as how are you, and the actual answer to it, bizarrely, is all right.
Okay, that's
so
good
it's
to know.
The same word back, but with a tone of voice of going down at the end. So if you ask the question, the tone is rising, all right, and if you're answering, it's all right, which is
great.
Yeah.
So this is very. And the last one, which I'm not feeling so comfortable to ask in this event, because it's an Israel. There are many Israelis, but the politics and all of these things, and sometimes I don't feel very comfortable to. I'm not feeling very comfortable to talk about my where I come from. Maybe somebody doesn't like Israel for political reasons. So if I want to avoid talking about it as much as I can, and somebody asks me, so what is the best way to avoid it as much as I can? Somebody asks me, what is your, usually they ask, sorry, interrupted you.
Oh, no, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Usually I notice that they ask, what is this accent? Because they don't want to ask directly, And I don't want to answer this question. So is there a way to, I don't feel comfortable to ask it in an Israeli forum, but I have to know how to.
Okay, so I'm going to answer I'm going to give you a slightly different answer, which is I've lived in London all my life. And I think one of the best things about London is it's a vastly multicultural international city, and it continues to be. I'm really sorry that you actually feel that way. And I kind of mean that only in the way that I've never met anybody, I'll be really, really honest with you, who has any anti-Israeli sentiments or, anything to say in that way. Now, that's not to say it doesn't exist. Of course, I'm not that blind or clearly, I mean, the world is the way the world is. But what I would say is, I personally would say that I would feel that it would be really uncomfortable for me that you didn't feel that you could say that you were from Israel. And I don't think that people generally in life, in London life, that you would meet, I don't think they would necessarily have that attitude. So I really hope that, that's something you don't ever come across. But my sense, and maybe that's something for other people to answer who have been in the UK for a really long time. I know there's some people here who have been here for like 18 years. But my general sense is that London is a very open, I think everybody here is in London. I can only really speak from my London experience, but, London is a very, very large Israeli community, it's a very large Jewish community as well, very established. And my sense is I've never come across that as an issue. So I don't know, I'm not sure whether anybody else has something to say about that who's been here, who is Israeli and been here longer, but that would be my view.
Okay, thank you very much. I learned a lot from your answers.
No problem.
Michal was just asking if she was saying thank you very much. Can you please clarify how we differentiate between a person who's satisfied with the service received and person who just being polite?
So that is the really, really difficult thing. So that is a really tricky one. I think the problem is it's difficult to know. I think you can only ask the question. If you've got a business and you need feedback, you can only ask the question and say, look, how did it go for you? You can invite somebody to write, if you've got run a business, to write a review for you and ask, and obviously if they're going to do that, they're going to endorse your business and say that it's great. But I think it's quite tricky to work out. I would say people generally don't like to complain unless it's something they've had a really, really bad experience. So I'm sorry, that's a bit of a difficult answer. I'm not quite the answer perhaps you wanted to hear, but normally people would leave it. They wouldn't necessarily probe unless they know the other person well. Okay,
perfect. Let's move on.
Good. Okay, so let's move on. So I'm just going to go through, we've talked about sorry already, but just to say, if you haven't followed Very British Problems, they're a Twitter feed who are very funny about British life, and they gave some ways to say, what is the meaning of sorry? There are lots of different meanings, as I mentioned earlier. I know there was a question about what to wear for work. We have this kind of term, smart casual, which doesn't really mean very much unless you see some pictures. But generally, occasionally people wear, it depends which industry you're working in. Clearly, if you're in more sort of professional client facing, occasionally you might need to wear a suit still. But I'd say that more and more that's going out of the window. People generally wear the smart top. Clearly, if you're working from home or online, it doesn't really matter what you wear in your bottom half. Some workplaces in real life don't like jeans and trainers, prefer a little bit smarter. But, I just want to give you some ideas because I know that was a question that came up, in terms of going for interviews or work, what to wear. Really, this is coming to a bit of a close now. So, and I'll do the last questions perhaps after I finish this section. So my top tips in terms of relocating in current times. So first of all, get out and get walking. If you haven't realised it, London is a brilliant city for walking. In fact, it's 47% green space and it's the first national park city, which is amazing. So London is kind of very randomly designed with lots of back streets and lots of funny kind of ways to get lost. And that's the brilliant thing about London. So get out and get walking. It's the perfect time to be doing it. talk to British people and ask their views. You know, I know you've had lots of questions here today, and I've been really happy to answer them. But you know, people, as long as you know come from a place of curiosity, people are always happy to answer those questions. Whatever you're into, there's clearly a meetup for that. And I'll give you a few ideas. I'm sure Dana's got loads of resources on this in terms of to get into whatever you're into and meet up with people and provide that support. Explore the best of online events. And by this, I mean that even though all the theatres are closed, even though all the galleries are closed, there are lots of online ways to kind of experience London culture. So don't put off by the fact that, you know, things are officially closed. There are lots of ways to experience culture right now. Also accept, if you have moved to the UK or you have moved in the last kind of year, you know, do accept these are unusual times. So I do appreciate that moving during lockdown is pretty hard going, but you will get to enjoy London properly soon. And, you know, things hopefully are going the right way in terms of easing up. And then finally, ask for help. Sometimes everything goes smoothly. Sometimes it can be a bit of a lonely experience. So I would say, you know, if you need help, whether it's emotional support, whether it's you need some support in terms of physical things or practical things, you reach out to somebody like Dana. It's really important you get that help and don't feel lonely or detached or disconnected from people, particularly at this moment. And I come back to purpose. Really do think about your purpose. So before we get into the questions, the final questions, a little bit about me. So if you are interested in kind of what I do and you want to know more about, you know, my programs, I just thought I'd give you a bit of an overview of this. So clearly I offer British culture programs. I do this not only for individuals in coaching sessions, but I also do this for teams. And I do my English communication coaching, which is actually for people who already speak English and work in English and use English every day, but need it for specific situations like interviews or meetings or presentations as examples. I do coaching programs. I run masterclasses quite regularly for small groups, and I'm just about to launch e-courses. So more about that coming soon. And then finally, I offer a couple of services which are really about feedback. If you just want a bit of feedback or want, you know, an hour with me to work on a particular question or a number of questions, then you're very welcome to book in with me and have a conversation around, you know, how I can help you specifically in your work situation. And coming to these wonderful gifts that I've promised you. So well done. I can see 59 people are still here. That's exciting, isn't it? Brilliant stuff. So, and of course, that's not counting all these Facebook stuff, people. So first of all, your gift. I am giving everybody here today my top 14 tips for decoding the British. So I know this link is probably a little bit difficult to remember, but feel free to take a photo of it now. I know, Dana, you've got the link as well, and you share it with everybody afterwards. So please go ahead and get those tips. I hope they're super helpful to you. And obviously, just let me know if you have any more questions from those tips. The next gift is for people who are already Easy London clients, then I'm offering a free 30-minute English communication or cultural coaching session for the first 10 clients that contact me. And so I know that you're a client, there's a special code that Dana's got. So if you want that code, get it off Dana and then come to me, contact me with the code, and we'll get you booked in, and let's make sure we have that Q&A session together. And then finally, if you like what I do and you've been interested in what I'm talking about today, I offer lots of free resources and tips. I send out a blog once a week. So feel free, again, to follow me. Dana's got this link and she'll share that as well. And just remains to say, I love connecting with people, and I really, you know, love kind of talking to new people. So feel free to follow me, whatever your social media platform is, whether you're more LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, and all of these things. And of course, you can have my email address as well, or phone number if you want to chat further. But thank you so much for joining me. And Dana, are there any sort of final questions for today at all?
Yes, one second. Oh, yes. So Anna was asking, at work, sometimes we have colleagues who we don't like their approach. What's the best way to handle such a situation?
Oh, okay. That's really interesting. So if you don't like somebody's approach, you have to kind of tread quite carefully with this one. So what I would use are phrases like, I was wondering whether you've thought about this, I've noticed in these situations that this happens. So what you're trying to do is be quite empathetic. You're trying to find ways to connect with the other person and avoid direct blaming or direct finger pointing. So you have to be quite soft in your language. So I don't know the situation, but I don't know if that sort of helps in answering that question.
אנה, זה עוזר לך, מה ששאלו, מה שוויקטוריה was saying? Okay, by the time she...
It doesn't help. I was just afraid to come a bit too aggressive, like, because I have a new job and sometimes I don't feel like the way they are, and I'm afraid to go to my manager and be a bit too aggressive and say, oh, this is not good, like this is how they usually would do that. So
so absolutely, so it's softening it down. So you might say, look, I've noticed in the situations this is going on and I'm not sure about it, and I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable about this area. I'm not sure that it's really, to the quality or to the level. These kinds of phrases might help you out, Anna.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We have another question from Macmel. I'm not sure if it's the right name. Any special tips for connecting children with UK children?
Oh wow, okay, so I don't actually work with children from what I do, but what I always say, people do ask me this question, and what I would say is things like holiday camps during the holidays, where they have the opportunity to meet other children from other schools and other areas. Obviously, you need to make sure the camps are, being run to COVID restrictions at the moment and COVID standards. But hopefully that helps. Yeah, I think holiday camps are a great way. Day camps is what I mean, where children go for the day, do activities, and they have the chance to meet other children from all over the world, from all over London.
Cool. I hope it's a really good advice, actually. I think the holiday camps are really good advice, good integration.
It's also a really, sorry, Dana, it's also a really good way, if you're worried about your children catching up on English, it's a really, really good way of doing it outside of school time.
I don't see any other questions in the chat. If anyone wants to come off mute, yes, I actually, but if someone wants to speak, go ahead. I just want to say something to David about being personal with people over work. And I find that once you go out for the drink and the alcohol is getting inside, people start to loosen up. I had people who never said anything to me at work, like, hi, bye, have a nice weekend, and that's it. And when we went out for a drink after work, for Christmas lunch, dinner, whatever we had, and they were drinking, oh my God, they just wouldn't shut up. I know everything about their lives, everything. But then the following day, when the alcohol wears off, hi, bye, have a nice weekend. That's it. I think when the first time it happened to me, I came home and I said, yes, I managed to build a bridge with this person. But no, it was just when alcohol is around. So yeah, it loosens people up sometimes.
Okay, yes, thank you. And I just wanted to say that I was referring to events like meetups when there's a certain hobby, so it's not at work, but it's a social event, but people are not drinking like, like crazy, they don't drink a lot, maybe one beer or something like that. So this is like this is like the area when you don't know exactly the level, but yes, Victoria has already answered that. So I understand no politics and not being too personal. And if you have something to add, I'll be happy also to.
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. And I think, yes, I mean, in terms of meetup, I suppose what connects you is the hobby or the interest. So hopefully that gives you something to focus on and talk about. But also, I think, sometimes you can ask questions like, you talked about people asking you, where are you from? Why not ask the question back? Like, where are you from? And you can get then people talking about, where they're from originally, or whether it's from the UK originally or from somewhere else. where they've been to around the UK, even, you know, it depends on your interest areas, but even you can ask questions like, oh, well, you know, I'd love to know where to go exploring around the UK, like when we can do this, and get people talking this way. Because everybody has sort of fairly safe topic that people like to talk about, or, you know, where else, what else should I experience in London? You know, what can you recommend to me? So these kinds of things are, these kinds of areas are really, really safe topics that you can explore as well.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
יש עוד שאלות? מישהו רוצה לשאול? Wow, I think they're shocked.
Oh, really?
I'm joking,
What
I'm
did you
joking.
say?
They may be processing a lot of information. For me, it was like an amazing eye-opener.
Oh,
as
I'm
I said.
so pleased. I'm so pleased. Well, hopefully I haven't overloaded everybody with too much information, but please feel free to reach out, connect with me, ask me questions. I'm really, really happy to help. But Dana, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been great to meet so many people this evening.
Yeah, and thank you for coming. My God, I know this was a brilliant webinar. We were all been waiting for it for quite some time. You saw the participation and how many people registered to come and view it today. So that's amazing. I also wanted to say that I put in the chat the links to all the groups that I was talking about. My new Facebook group, the networking group for women in the UK. The WhatsApp group for just promotion, no blabbing, I promise, just letting you know about new webinars. Everything is in the chat, and if you're missing anything, you can always send me an email or just find me online. I'm on every social media now. in the 21st century, finally, I'm on every social media outlet. So thank you everyone. לילה טוב לכולם. אני מודה לכם על הזמן שלכם. ונתראה בוובינרים הבאים, אל תשכחו, יש לנו 2 וובינרים נוספים במאי, אז אל תפספסו.
לילה טוב, תודה רבה דנה.
לילה טוב, תודה רבה.
Thank you so much, Victoria.
Victoria.
Wow, it was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana and Victoria. Thank you very much.
תודה, תודה.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you
Bye,
very much.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
דנה, thank you very much. תודה רבה.
בשמחה.
את מדהימה.
בשמחה נשמה, בשמחה.
אין עלייך. Thank you so much, Victoria. It was
You're
pleasure
so
to
welcome.
meet you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I love it to meet you too.
Thank you.
Thank you and good night.
Good night. Bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank
ביי
you.
חגית, לילה טוב.
Thank you. לילה טוב. תודה רבה. Thank you.
בכיף.
It was exciting, really. Thank you.
Thank you.
בשמחה. I'll start taking them off gradually. I think some people just kept it open and maybe left. So let me start removing people. I'll stop the recording first of all. Okay, we can stop the live.